achieved.
Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson, and on this episode of the show, we're taking a look at the upcoming UFC Fight Night 45 event, which will take place on a Wednesday night, July 16th. I will be giving you my predictions for the 6 main card fights on this show. All of my preliminary breakdowns will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. Now, I'm actually really excited with this card. A lot of good fights. There's another reason. This is the first card that I've really been able to sit down and do solid research for each of the main card fights. With my job and all the other busy things going on, I really hadn't done a ton of research. I might watch a little bit of clip of a fight here, a little fight there. I go on a lot of my old predictions, a lot of my old notes. This was the actual first one in quite a while where I sat down and I watched 3 or 4 fights on each fighter, and I feel a lot better about these predictions, a lot stronger. I'm not saying I'll do any better. Hopefully, I hope to do better, but the point is I at least have a solid understanding of how these fights could play out, and I feel like it should turn over into a good record, but again, no guarantees. I'm coming off a couple subpar showings. Again, a lot of fights in 2 days makes it difficult to put as much preparation as possible, and when you have that number of upsets like we did at UFC 175, it's again, it can be very difficult as far to get everything correct. Also, for this event, the bet packs will be for sale, so please consider buying one of those if you're interested in betting on the event. And the 3rd installment of Sprawl and Brawl Fantasy MMA will be taking place. The first 2 events were a success. Congratulations to John Edward Alvarez, UFC 175, scored 24 points and took home $90. Again, it's free to play, or you can see how you stack up against the rest of the competition, or you pay $5 and makes you eligible for the prize pool, which again, it all depends on the number of people that play. So if you can get your friends and everyone else involved, I'll put $5 in. It makes it a pretty interesting and fun night, and maybe you're getting paid a couple $100 at the end of the night. I hope to continue to see it grow as we go. And again, check out Sprawl and Brawl Fantasy MMA on my website, and you will see the very easy to follow forum. You pick only, though keep in mind, only 8 fights. Do not pick all the fights. Pick only 8. Submit the winner and the method. The prediction panel will also be along on the website to give their breakdowns of each and every fight. They're always doing a fantastic job. We've got 6 main card fights. Let's get to the first one. We kick things off in the UFC's featherweight division in a fight that certainly has fight of the night potential, or at least a bonus possibly on the line, as Lucas Minero Martins, 14-1-0, battles Alex the Spartan White, undefeated with a record of 10-0. Now Martins is fighting at 145 pounds. He's kind of been all over the map. He debuted at 155, cut all the way down to 135 for his last fight, and now he's back at 145. So he's covered 3 different divisions in his UFC career, a very short UFC career so far. Both guys are striking based with decent secondary grappling games, but they prefer to fight on the feet. At least that's what they've shown so far. White comes from a boxing and kickboxing background. 4 of his wins have come by knockout. In his debut, he took out a veteran in Esteban Payan, caught him in an early exchange, and finished him with a quick flurry on the mat and showed his striking capabilities. He demoed some very solid kicking techniques and a couple of spinning attacks that were pretty impressive for a young fighter making his first showing in the UFC. Now, he needs to remain composed. That's one area where he seems to get a little bit reckless, and if he gets too aggressive, that can cost him in the long run. And he also will raise his chin up a little bit, and for a guy like Martins who will throw, he certainly could target that and take advantage of it. Now, Martins is the Shooto Box Academy product, very aggressive striker, which has the tendency to come out of that camp. He has power. We saw him finish Jeremy Larson in the 3rd round fighting at lightweight. It was a brutal back-and-forth affair. And also, when he fought Junior Hernandez, he dropped him prior to submitting him. So he certainly has the ability to put guys down on the feet. 9 of his 15 wins have come by knockout. He's a Muay Thai-based striker. He's very aggressive. He really likes to open up with his striking and go after opponents. But that makes him very hittable, and he's vulnerable to being countered. He was getting outlanded by Jeremy Larson, who's far from an elite-level striker. In that fight, he was taking some big shots. And Larson was routinely finding home for some big power shots that had Martins backing off, and it was just a matter of time before one of those guys fell, and it happened to be Larson in that matchup. Now, this fight will most likely not hit the mat unless there's a knockdown. I don't expect to see either one of these guys shooting. But if you look at White, he's a BJJ blue belt, 5 wins by submission. Not a great wrestling game, but he's very aggressive off his back and more than capable of pulling off something if he does get put in that position. Martins, 4 submission wins against Junior Hernandez. An excellent back take, but that was partially aided by Hernandez being so hurt from the striking exchanges. Martins has been taken down a couple of times, or was taken down a couple of times by Jeremy Larson, so keep that in mind. The Brazilian also appears to be way too hittable. That's the way I look at it. Way too hittable, and the way he's aggressive, it just simply creates too many openings for White to capitalize on when he attacks. A lesser striker in Jeremy Larson was having success. I think White will as well. Martins, keep in mind, he did tap to strikes when he fought Edson Barboza, which is something you question his durability a little bit, even though he's been in some wars. But my prediction for this matchup is Alex White to defeat Lucas Martins by knockout. We now go down to the flyweight division, but of course this fight involves John Lineker, the number 7 ranked flyweight on the planet, so it very well could be a catchweight bout before we get things all get said and done. But number 7 ranked John Lineker, Hands of Stone, his nickname, 23 wins, 7 losses, taking on Ozkilic, the Turkish Delight, as he likes to be called, with a record of 9 wins and 2 losses. Now what we have here is a traditional wrestler versus striker matchup. Both guys are coming off decision defeats, which ended sizable runs and really knocked them down a peg within the division standings. Lineker is serious power, 11 wins by knockout. He can really throw in volume as well, and that can, when he works the two in conjunction, it can really be a lot for his opponents to take over, to deal with, and he has some of the best power in the lighter weight divisions. The one problem with Lineker, though, he needs to avoid looking solely for the knockout. Set up his strikes, use some feints, use his jab, let the knockout come naturally. Don't go hunting it, don't become predictable. Against Ali Bogatinov, he was trying to use that, a little more variety. He worked the body effectively, then he went upstairs. The problem was he didn't throw enough versus Ali, and he averages 5 strikes per minute overall so far in his UFC run, but he landed less than 30 strikes in that entire fight against the Russian. And a lot of that had to do with he was concerned with getting taken down. He spent a lot of that first round on his back, where obviously he's not scoring a lot of strikes there either. But of course, you got to become concerned with being taken down, and you have to be a little conservative. He showed a much better sprawl in round 2, and that's something that he'll need to take advantage of here. And he has fought and beat wrestlers before. When he fought another Russian, Aljamain, he nullified his wrestling with a good heavy sprawl and solid underhooks, and just was physical and rejected the takedown attempts and turned him into some offense of his own. Now, Ozkilic, a very good wrestler, an NJCAA All-American wrestler, has averaged 6 takedowns at 70% completion rate so far in the UFC. He landed 9 against Luis Smolka, 3 versus Darren Uyanoyama. But keep in mind, both those guys are grapplers who are more than willing to go, let the fight go to the ground. That's where they wanted it to go. So when a wrestler takes them down, they're not going to defend it. They're just going to start attacking off their back. And when you look at that Smolka fight, which is the last one for Alp, Smolka did an excellent job countering and reversing off the ground and turning the takedowns by Ozkilic into an offensive opportunity for Smolka. Now, Alp has a decent top game, but he isn't a great finisher. Just 2 knockouts and 1 submission compared to 6 decision wins so far in his career. If Alp can score takedowns with regularity, he could take the jump out of Lineker's step, both by making him cautious on the feet and maybe taxing that cardio a little bit. But again, he had trouble with Smolka on the mat, couldn't keep him down, and wore himself out as a result, and really gassed out, was landing takedowns and couldn't do anything else with it. On the feet, Alp's striking isn't that great. It's improving, but he doesn't want to stand and trade with John Lineker. That would be a massive mistake. And, it could make it tough for him as well to cover that distance when looking for a takedown, because he has to set it up with his striking, and if Lineker can avoid and maintain the distance, that's going to really take away Alp's ability to shoot. Lineker probably learned in the Ali Bogatinov fight, really grew from that experience of fighting a good wrestler. I expect him to go to the body here with some solid body shots, try and attack that gas tank of Ozkilic and slow him down a little bit. Lineker needs to sprawl and brawl, be very physical. Alp hasn't faced someone like him that can hit as hard as he can, at least at this level of competition. We're always concerned with seeing Johnny Lineker making weight. His cardio isn't great, but again, Alp Ozkilic's cardio showed the Smolka fight certainly isn't where it needs to be. Lineker's been submitted 4 times, which is a concern for a guy who can take the fight to the ground, but Alp hasn't shown much of a submission game. Lineker, I expect, is going to work him over, eventually land that big shot, maybe put those shots to the body and hurt him that way. My prediction is John Lineker to defeat Alp Ozkilic by knockout. In the lightweight division, Justin J-Bomb Salas, 12-5-0, battles Joe Proctor, 9-2-0. Salas is a collegiate wrestler. Proctor trains BJJ under Joe Lozon, so both guys come from grappling backgrounds. Physically, Proctor's going to have a 2-inch height advantage and a 2-inch reach advantage, so he'll have a little bit of length on Salas, who's definitely the more compact fighter. Proctor was coming off a considerable layoff heading into his last fight against Cristiano Marcelo, and it took him a little bit to get going in that matchup. I expect to be much more comfortable in this appearance. Salas has had been a tale of 2 fighters basically in the UFC. He's had solid wins over Anton Kuivan and Aaron Riley, and most recently Ben Wall, where he knocked him out. That was by far his most impressive outing. And Riley's a solid veteran, and Kuivan and a physical specimen, but you flip the script and you look at his losses. When he lost Thiago Tavares, he was submitted fairly quickly, and Tim Means an even quicker knockout loss early in that matchup. So again, he's been put away in both of his defeats. Salas has, he had a mixed success with his wrestling so far, despite coming from a decent pedigree. 20% completion rating. He struggled in the Ben Wall matchup, going 0 for 6, and Wall shrugged those takedowns off with relative ease. Now, on the feet, Salas does have decent striking, so he's not that one-dimensional. He has some power, 4 wins by knockout. When he took out Wall in the last matchup, he landed a short punch from the clinch, and eventually it hurt him and eventually put him down with another shot. probably the win would have knocked him over after he clipped him initially. He varies his attack very effectively. He likes to use his different speeds. Picked up a solid win over Aaron Riley in a very gritty, striking-based battle where he did use some takedowns. But, it was a split decision, so it was close, but he showed some of his moxie in that matchup. Now, he has been knocked out twice, including, as I said, aforementioned, the Tim Means knockout. So, he certainly, his chin's a little, it's there to be tested if Proctor can get his fists on it. Now, Joe Proctor, a very gritty, capable fighter. Not a lot of pop on the feet, though, only one knockout win. We did see him hurt Cristiano Marcelo with a quick right hand. And that's something, if he can land on Salas, will certainly back him off a little bit. His striking game is improving. He showed big strides between his layoff and the last fight with Ramsey Nijem heading into his last fight. And again, I expect to see him more comfortable and more willing to go at it. He has a strong grappling game. He was taken down several times by Nijem, but he had a lot of success against a pretty strong wrestler, countering on the mat and getting in some good position and attempting some submissions. He really likes that high elbow guillotine, and that's something you're going to need to watch in this matchup. He can lock it up very quickly. Cristiano Marcelo is a very good grappler, and Joe Proctor locked up a pretty tight one early in that matchup. He didn't finish it by any stretch of the imagination, but he certainly threatened with it and showed that he's very confident with it and will attempt it. I think he attempted a couple of times. He also took a shot at it with Ramsey and was close there. He's going to have a height and reach advantage. I already mentioned that over Justin Salas, which should give him opportunities to, once they tie up, for him to try and lock up that neck, control Salas, and submit him. And Justin Salas has been submitted 3 times. And I expect, the way Proctor's been working with Lozon, it's going to make him a very aggressive submission fighter. Not a guy who's going to lay back and not take advantage of positions. He's going to jump on stuff. Now, it could cost him position, but, when you're going for opportunities, they're going to materialize. And I think that helps him out here. So far, his UFC career, he's attempted a number of submissions. He's not afraid to try those fights, but he needs to be careful not to give up position. And that's something I'm concerned about a little bit against a guy like Salas. But again, Salas' wrestling game hasn't impressed me. This is going to be an interesting fight. I'm very much looking forward to it. I think it'll be a gritty matchup, which favors Joe Proctor a little bit. And my prediction is Joe Proctor to defeat Justin Salas by submission. Watch that guillotine. Fight number 4 is in the UFC's welterweight division as Rick the Horror Story, 16-8-0, battles the returning Leonardo Mafra with a record of 5 wins and just a single defeat. Actually, I don't know if that record's 100% correct, because he's had a good run of late, actually. So I'm going to say that's not the correct record there that the UFC website has. Now, if you look at Rick's story first, he started out with a big run, beating guys like Johnny Hendricks, Thiago Alves, and really got things rolling. Then he started to struggle with top-level competition. He seems to go back and forth, beating lower-level guys, and then he gets that push-up, and he loses to those guys who are at that next level. He's definitely going to be a gatekeeper type of guy, and Leonardo Mafra has the opportunity to jump through that gate. Mafra, tough Brazilian competitor, made it to semifinals, lost his debut in the UFC at welterweight. He cut down. He's had 5 straight wins since going out, so obviously that record of 5-1 certainly not correct. He's been called back as a result of his recent success. He has power. 8 of his wins have come by knockout, but he's a very wild striker. Throws a lot, wades forward, swinging wildly, really doesn't set anything up, looks to catch guys, almost runs forward. He drops his hands. He's incredibly vulnerable to counters, very hittable, and he was knocked out in his debut, which isn't shocking. It's a guy who's not, a great striker in his own right, and Thiago Perpetuo. Now, he throws a lot of arm punches as well, which is something which questions whether he's going to have enough steam on it to put a guy down. But he did show some pop in his debut, but they're not nearly as good as he could be. And in the fight since going to the UFC, I haven't seen that much change in his technique. Also, keep in mind, in his first fight, he was taken down and beaten up on the mat, and he's never faced an American wrestler before like he's going to in Rick's Story, and that's something I think Story should capitalize on, and I anticipate that he will. One thing, too, with Mafra, before we talk more about Story, his style appears to expend a lot of energy. The way he throws his wild strikes is very aggressive and reckless, and he got tired in his debut, and I think he's going to get tired in this matchup if this fight goes long enough for him to get tired. In his debut against Perpetuo, he was backing up, he was putting his back on the cage, and that's where the position he got knocked out from, and that's a position that Rick Story does some of his best work from. He really can unload on guys when he pins them on the cage. He'll go to the head, then go to the body, and come back up when they drop down to block, and he's incredibly effective from there, and he can really overwhelm opponents opponents. He did that to Quinn Mulhern. He had a ton of success against an absolutely fantastic striker in Thiago Alves from that very position. He throws incredibly hard. He's a compact striker. He doesn't overextend himself. He likes to keep his strikes within, and he can really rip shots his head to the body and to the head, and that's going to pay off here if he can take away the gas tank of his opponent. He has serious power despite only 4 wins by knockout. We saw him hurt Mike Pyle in a fight. It was controversial that he ended up losing by decision. When he fought Brian Ebersol, he didn't finish him, but he had Ebersol in all kinds of pain, and it was showing up. And Ebersol's a tough veteran fighter, and Rick Story really put it on him. Story could look to use his wrestling as well. He's averaged 2.87 takedowns at 52%, and he has used takedowns in the past to dominate and drop some hard ground and pound, and that's something, an option I think is going to be available for him if he can, especially with Mafra coming forward. Look for Rick to try and time him and hit that double leg and put him on the mat and beat him up. He also has a submission game, even though his numbers, again, don't suggest it. We saw him tap a pretty good fighter in Brian Foster, so certainly he could be looking for that if he can wear his opponent out and set up a submission. Where Story's run into problems before was with aggressive wrestlers, guys like Charlie Brennan and Martin Camp and Damian Maia, guys who are good grapplers who took it to him, put him on his back, and attacked him. That's not Leonardo Mafra's style. I think Story's going to be able to sit back and enjoy this matchup. I don't think Mafra really has a ton for him unless he can catch him on the feet. We did see Calvin Gastelum hurt Rick and nearly finish him. Story has come up flat in fights before, and he needs to avoid that. He needs to get back in there and get this in his comfort zone. I think Mafra's a perfect stylistic matchup for him. I think he'll be able to exploit some of the holes. And my prediction is Rick Story to defeat Leonardo Mafra by TKO. Co-main event of the evening takes place in the UFC's lightweight division. It is an excellent matchup. 2 fantastic lightweight fights to finish off the night. First, we get the number 13th ranked Edson Jr. Barboza, 13-2-0, battling the always scrappy 14-5-0 Edvin Dunham. Now, both guys are coming off very quick and brutal losses to Donald Cerrone. Dunham was submitted early in the second round. Barboza was knocked out in the first round. Both guys have a ton of talent, but when it comes right down to it, they failed to secure that signature win to push them to the next level. Against Cerrone, that was their opportunity in both those matchups and just could not get the job done. Now, Barboza, style-wise, is a very dangerous Muay Thai striker. Evan Dunham, on the other hand, a very aggressive brawler with a solid wrestling, striking repertoire that he can call upon. Now, looking at Edson, brutal power in a variety of weapons. Keep that in mind. 8 knockouts overall. Very good hands. Throws a ton of kicks, a variety of different kicking techniques. A lot of spinning attacks, and his leg kicks are absolutely vicious. He can throw them as singles, or he's very quick and it's hard to defend against, or he can set them up with punches and finish with a solid leg kick that maybe doesn't have quite as much pop, but still very effective. He scored a pair of TKOs in the UFC via leg kicks. Even if he doesn't knock a guy out with his leg or stop them with the leg kicks, he takes away their movement and their ability to throw power. And if you're a wrestler like Dunham, if you can't shoot because you don't have that good base because your legs have been damaged, that really limits your ability to win a fight. When he's striking, he uses a lot of movement, which can make it very hard to close the distance. He wants to fight at distance. He wants to stand back and pick Dunham apart from the outside. Looking at some of his problems, Jamie Varner and Ross Pearson had a lot of success using pressure and forcing him to go backwards. And that chin of Barboza's is a major question mark, and that's showing up not just a fluke now, it seems to be a reality. Jamie Varner KO'd him. We saw him Donald Cerrone caught him with a jab and dropped him, which eventually Cerrone jumped on him and submitted him. And it's Danny Castillo also dropped him with a big shot in that fight, mounted him, almost submitted him, and almost pounded him out. And he was all over him. And so it's 3 different situations that right off the top of my head I can look at and say Edson Barboza has been hurt on the feet. But going back to the Cerrone matchup, Cerrone's a very talented striker, and Barboza was doing incredibly well on the feet early on, and he had Cerrone backing up, and he landed some good shots against him before getting dropped. Number-wise, though, he averages just over 4 strikes landed per minute while giving up roughly 3.8. That's a lot of strikes for an elite-level, high-level striker to be absorbing. That's something Barboza's going to want to dwindle down. Again, some of those numbers are probably inflated by the Castillo matchup, but nonetheless, those are numbers he wants to limit, especially if his chin is a question mark. Against Castillo, he showed a lot of heart to survive that matchup and rally and win the fight, but still, it's not something you want to be doing day in and day out. For Evan Dunham to be successful here, he needs to turn this matchup into a brawl, keep Barboza moving backwards, and that's, Varner KO'd him in a similar situation. That's what Dunham needs to look for. Unfortunately for Evan Dunham, he's a notoriously slow starter. Lets his opponents get settled in, and that's not good if Barboza gets rolling, gets opening up with those leg kicks, starts landing and taking away that mobility. And that's something Dunham cannot allow him to do. He needs to get started quickly. When you look back at some of Dunham's fights against similar strikers, or at least guys who are going to throw something similar at him, Dunham was getting busted up very badly by TJ Grant's Muay Thai, and Cerrone was absolutely teeing off on him with knees and leg kicks, and hurt him a couple of times and dropped him in that matchup. And he's throwing something. Cerrone and Barboza's striking style not exactly the same, but still enough to draw similarities. Dunham, again, he's struggled in the past with speed and range fighters, and he couldn't get comfortable and get his striking arsenal going, and it makes him a little bit one-dimensional when he can't strike, and it makes it harder for him to shoot in. When you go back to his fight against Rafael dos Anjos, he was having a little bit of trouble with the speed and movement of the Brazilian there. He kept coming forward. He was getting tagged with shots as he came in. And RDA is not nearly as fluid as Barboza is on the feet. Also, you go back forever ago to one of the UFC Fight for the Troop nights when he fought Melvin Guillard in the main event. The speed factor was massive for Guillard, and Guillard knocked him out with relative ease. One thing to keep in mind with Edson Dunham, though, he wears and shows damage a lot. He will bleed, and that can impact the judge's decision when they're looking at who's going to be beaten up more. If they're both landing and Dunham's bleeding more, that's going to certainly cost him in the visual department. One thing I would say, Dunham needs to use his wrestling to take away the leg kicks of Barboza. Catch him if it's possible. They're very quick. Shoot. And, he should be looking to take this fight down to the ground regardless of that situation. He's a BJJ black belt, 6 submission wins. He hasn't put up great numbers of late with his grappling, but he can smother an opponent if he gets the opportunity. Dunham is tough. He can take a lot of damage. And Barboza needs to watch that chin. Don't stand still. Use that movement, a lot of lateral movement. And a finish seems very likely from both guys' points. But I think Barboza will just outpoint him, outwork him, do some damage. Dunham sticks around. He never lands that big shot that changes the complexion of the fight. And my prediction is Edson Barboza to defeat Evan Dunham by decision. Now we're in the main event of the evening. We're still in the lightweight division. This is going to be a very excellent matchup and a longer prediction just like the last one because there's a lot of working parts. What we have here is the number 6 ranked Donald Cowboy Cerrone, 23-6-0 with 1 no contest, taking a number 7th ranked Jim Miller, 24-4-0 with 1 no contest as well. So very experienced fighters. Both men have been on the cusp of title shots and on the cusp of top rankings in the division, but have come up short in the past. You look at Jim Miller, he lost to Benson Henderson, and he lost to Nate Diaz, both guys who went on to challenge for the title during that time period. Donald Cerrone lost to Nate Diaz as well. Anthony Pettis, the now current lightweight champion, and Rafael dos Anjos guys are able to use that fight and move on where Cerrone had to take a step back. Physically, Cerrone 4-inch height advantage, 2-inch reach advantage. So those are going to show up in the length and the distance advantage for Cerrone, and he definitely will look to exploit that. Both men, though, are excellent on the mat. We're going to talk about that aspect of the fight first. Cerrone, 15 wins by submission, just 1 loss. He tapped Evan Dunham, as I just mentioned, and Edson Barboza, the 2 guys fighting in the co-main event. Also Dennis Seaver, so he's very good on the mat. He's tapped a number of good fighters. Only submission loss overall came in 2010 against Benson Henderson, the former champion. He got caught, I believe it was a guillotine back in the WEC. Miller, 13 wins by submission, and 2 of his submission wins are fantastic. Tapping out Fabricio Camoes is an incredible win, a very dangerous black belt, and getting Charles Oliveira, tapping him out to a leg lock. That was an awesome submission as well. As a feather in the cap of Miller and shows how good a grappler he is. He also tapped out guys like Melvin Guillard and Yancy Medeiros in his last fight. That's impressive as well, showing when you can, anytime you can finish and submit guys at this level, especially with submission wins, certainly taking a dive over the last couple years in the UFC. His only lost submission was by Nate Diaz. It was an absolutely nasty choke that put him, and he actually, keep in mind, he was also put to sleep by Pat Bam Bam Healy in a matchup that was flipped into a no contest when Healy tested positive for a banned substance. So he should have 2 submission losses on his record. So certainly, he can be submitted. Neither guy has overwhelming takedown numbers, both under 2 takedowns per fight at a roughly 50% completion rate. And both have fights where they couldn't do anything off their back despite their grappling pedigree. Cerrone struggled against Rafael dos Anjos from top position, and Miller had a lot of trouble against Ben Henderson when Henderson got on top. And you look at Miller, he comes from a collegiate wrestling background. He's capable off his back, but he prefers to be on top, and he's the more likely of the 2 fighters to shoot in. For Cerrone, he's incredibly dangerous off his back. We saw him catch Evan Dunham a couple of times, eventually submitting him with a triangle for the finish from that position. Cerrone's ground game is usually birthed off either takedowns attempt from his own opponent that he can defend, or counter after he hits the mat, or knockdowns, which was the case against Dennis Seaver, and of course against a couple of other fighters as well. And that's why he doesn't have a ton of knockout numbers, so he usually goes for the submission. One thing here, grappling could cancel each other out, and it's a possibility, but both guys really pride themselves on their ability to submit good grapplers. So I fully anticipate to see this fight going to the ground at some point in time. It'll be very interesting to see how it plays out. On the feet, Cerrone is the more dangerous striker. He has both power and technique. He only has 3 knockouts, but as I mentioned, it's because he goes for submissions. When he knocked out Melvin Guillard, the first thing you saw him go for was he was going to go after a rear naked choke until he realized, no, pointless now, Guillard's gone. It's hard to believe that, those numbers. He only has 3 knockouts. The number of times we see him damage guys. He took out Adriano Martins with a brutal head kick, the Guillard fight, and he also stopped Charles Oliveira with a body shot and hurt him there. He's incredibly dangerous on the feet. Good combinations, solid kicks. He has that vicious stepping knee that he tagged Evan Dunham with a number of times, really worked him over and can do a lot of damage. Now, he was struggling with the speed and technique of both Edson Barboza and Rafael dos Anjos. He was knocked down in the Rafael dos Anjos fight. He got buzzed by Barboza early in that matchup. And he was stopped by body shots from Anthony Pettis, which could be an area of vulnerability. But, it's something I don't think. Those are the type of fighters who aren't the same skill set that Jim Miller is going to present in this matchup, and so we need to keep that in mind as well. And Cerrone's outstruck a number of very dangerous strikers and capable strikers, guys like KJ Noons, Jeremy Stevens, the aforementioned Melvin Guillard. He had trouble with Nate Diaz in the pressure aspect of that fight, but he just certainly didn't see himself in that matchup. He is known, just like Evan Dunham in the last matchup, Cerrone is known for being a bit of a slow starter. He seems to have turned that around a little bit of late. Miller, on the other hand, can be incredibly a quick starter. We saw against Joe Lozon, he came in with those level trajectory elbows and really put it on Lozon quickly. Miller's working to improve his boxing, and it's certainly showing up. A lot of clinch fighting against Nate Diaz, where Nate had a lot of success with the knees, and he dropped Miller with a straight left, and he was battering Miller at distance, which was something that was having a lot of success, which you didn't expect to see Nate Diaz doing, or at least a lot of people didn't at the time. Miller also had trouble with Melvin Guillard's speed before eventually getting that fight to the mat and submitting him. Now, when you look at Jimmy Miller, he hasn't faced the quality of striker Cerrone has, like Nate Diaz, Edson Barboza, Melvin Guillard, KJ Noons, Rafael dos Anjos, Adriano Martins, Anthony Pettis, Dennis Seaver. That's a long list of guys that Cerrone's tied up with, some of which he's beaten, some of which he hasn't. Miller's faced more grappling-oriented opponents and some lower-level guys like Fabricio Camoes, Medeiros, and Kamal Shalarus, guys he's beaten of late. And that's something to keep in mind, is Cerrone's been fighting at a higher level more recently, even though Miller has been up there at times. The ground could be very interesting. Miller could smother him, but really, again, that's not his style. And he could catch Cerrone. It's a possibility, not 100% likely. Cerrone, though, is going to be the better striker. I think he's going to have a lot of success working from distance. He seems to be more motivated of late. I could see Cerrone scoring a big-time knockdown and hooking up the submission, absolutely a possibility, but I think he's going to land something big. My prediction is Donald Cerrone to defeat Jim Miller by knockout. So those are my 6 main card predictions for the upcoming UFC Fight Night 45 event. I'm really looking forward to this. I'm sorry some of them were really long. It's just because I've done so much more research for these fights and had an opportunity to analyze so much more fight footage. I had so much more to say. Either way, I hope you enjoyed the prediction show. Please consider signing up for the Sprawl and Brawl Fantasy MMA. Again, it's only $5. If you do want to pay, you don't have to pay. You can certainly sign up for free. That's not a problem. You just can't win the overall prize. There'll be, hopefully, we're going to see over $100 in prize given out to the winner. Only one winner, so you can definitely take that home. As always, thank you very much for listening, and I will see you. We have a fight a couple days after this event, so I will see you back here very quickly.